Hey beer friends! So I'm super excited about today's video. But before I get into that, let me just reintroduce myself. My name is Tammy. I'm a brewer by trade, by study, but I've been working as a winemaker for 2 years. So I do a little bit of everything. I've been working on my Certified Cicerone exam for the last year and a half, and I've already taken the written portion. And the next step is to do the in-person tasting exam. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to do a little bit of off flavoring here. But yeah, check me out on Instagram, and you can see my other YouTube videos as well. And you might notice that I'm in sort of a weird location. I'm at home in California visiting my mom, and I didn't have anywhere else to film this video. I left it till the last minute, because that's what I do. And she's watching TV downstairs, so it's really loud. So here I am in my older brother's old bedroom, sitting at his desk. But then I also thought it's probably apropos because he definitely spent some time drinking in here. So it's not like this has never happened before. But anyway, sideline. So with the Certified Cicerone exam, there is a tasting portion, which you have to do in person. And what's nice about the Cicerone website is that they'll actually give you sample questions, so you can kind of see how it's set up and what the test would be like. So I printed a copy, and basically there's 3 different portions, and the first one, which is what I'm going to be kind of focusing on today, is off flavors. So there's 5 off flavors that you want to be familiar with. As you can see, there's one here I crossed out. There used to be 6, but for some reason at the beginning of 2025, Cicerone got rid of the acetic off flavor. So maybe they thought it was too easy. Maybe they thought you don't really see it that often. I don't know, but basically that's kind of like a vinegary taste. So just think of like acetic acid or vinegar. So basically, the ones that you really want to know for the Certified Cicerone level exam, which is level 2, is acetaldehyde, diacetyl, DMS, which is dimethyl sulfide, light struck, and then what they call trans 2-nonenal, and that's like a papery oxidation sort of flavor. So what they do is they'll give you samples of beer, and then they'll ask you, does this have an off flavor? And if yes, what is the off flavor? So you would say like, yes, it is acetaldehyde or whatever. If there isn't one, if it tastes normal as it should, you would just write none. Then there's this portion down here where they'll give you 2 different beers that are kind of similar. So it'll probably be like similar in color, or maybe even like location. So like the first one, German Pils, and then Munich Helles. So that'll ask you, they'll give you a sample, and then they'll ask you, what is this a sample of? And so you would just circle which one you think it is. Then on the back, it's kind of like a combo of both. So it'll say, here's a sample of, this one says Munich Helles, and it'll say, does it show signs of mishandling? And in terms of the test, mishandling, I believe, would be, I just say, signs of mishandling since leaving the brewery. So when we talk about off flavors, there's 2 ways that beer can have an off flavor. So it could either become like from the process, or like the ingredients themselves, or it comes from the handling and how it's served, like after it's already been brewed. So this is asking about, once the beer is made and like packaged and it's left, does it have an off flavor? And so you would say yes or no, and then you would write what the off flavor is, and then you would say where it came from. So it could be like the glassware's not clean, or usually it's the draft lines are not clean, or maybe somehow it got oxidized like on the way to the brewery, something like that. So you would give like a little description of where the off flavor came from. So I'm gonna kind of focus on this section right here, because this is what I've been preparing for with all my little ingredients here. There's a couple ways you can practice off flavors. So you can buy a kit, and I've talked about this before, but basically it's either like a liquid vial, and you usually would have like a liter of beer. So it's kind of difficult in that sense because you need to have 1 liter of beer per spike. So that's a lot of beer. So you would break open the little vial and then pour the liquid in, mix it up, and then you would, taste it, and you know what that off flavor is. I believe there's also some that are like powder form. So same idea, you just like open the capsule, dump it in. The only issue with these kits I found is that they're pretty expensive. They're in the like $200 range for like 6. As you get to like higher levels of Cicerone, there's like 20, 30, off flavors that you can practice. And so then it gets more expensive. But basically the flavor kits are expensive. You need to have a lot of beer to spike with the kit. And then what do you do with it? Like one person really only needs about this much. So if you have a whole liter, that's a lot of beer. So like if you could get a group of friends together, it's more affordable. And then you can all share the beer, but that's not always the case for some people. Cicerone, does offer off flavor tasting classes in person, but again, those are based on sort of like demand. So if there's an area where there's a lot of people that are like wanting to learn this, this skill, they'll schedule a tasting class, and then you sign up, and then everything is provided for you. I did one of those last year in Detroit. However, I think the minimum to run the class was like 6, and we were maybe at 6, and then like maybe 5 actually showed up. So there was like a time there where we weren't sure if it was actually going to happen. So those are kind of like not guaranteed. There's another company that makes off-flavor kits called Araxa, and those are actually the ones that Cicerone uses in their official exams that like I'll be doing. So they offered same kind of in-person type thing, but again, it's like you'd have to find one that's near you, and then there's the cost of the class and things like that. You can do, some offer sort of like an at-home kit, so they'll send you like enough to do like 1 beer, and you basically would dose each like bottle of beer, and then you watch like an online or like a guided recording video to walk you through how to do it. So there's a couple different options. I'm going with the option of trying to do it myself because it's the most affordable. And one thing that's nice is that because the Cicerone program is based on the BJCP guidelines, which is the beer judging certification program, you can go to the BJCP website and they have a lot of resources that you can use to help you study. So one of those very handy resources is this guide for doctoring beers. And they basically tell you, this is the off flavor. This is what it's like, what the flavor tastes like, so you know. This is how much you add of whatever you're going to be adding to your beer. And then it'll tell you if you're doing it for a 12-ounce bottle or a 1 liter. So it's got most of the major off flavors here. The only one it doesn't have, surprisingly, well, it doesn't have 2. It doesn't have DMS, and it doesn't have acetaldehyde. So I'm kind of winging it a little bit here. So I'm going to actually do 3 like spikes, and then one of them I'll just kind of talk about because it's pretty easy. So basically you can download this. It's free, BJCP website, and then, practice with it, that kind of thing. The other thing I'll say is that right now I don't have like maybe like an eyedropper. So I had to kind of guess how much to add, but that's what we do when we're trying to be bootleg and budget. An important thing to note is that when you're adding your additives to the beer, you want to make sure that your beer is cold and that your additives are cold as well. Because if you're putting something that's warm, like from the shelf, into your beer, excuse me, it could cause foaming. So you want everything to be at the same temperature. Another thing to remember is that this is not perfect. So when you are in like a tasting exam or like maybe you're judging, you'd have to remember that these are being prepared on like a larger scale for a group of people. So maybe there's someone that, puts together like 5 liters of beer for everyone that's taking the test. And so they have to put in the additive, make sure it's mixed, and then serve it to everybody. So by the time you get it, it might be a little warm. It might not have a lot of carbonation. So you just have to kind of deal with what you're given, sort of thing. Obviously, if you can do it like this, as close to like serving temperature and everything as possible, that's better. But you know, it's not always ideal when you're in like a testing or a judging situation. So those are the things I wanted to just throw out there. So the ones I'm going to be talking about today, and basically what I'm going to do is pour a sample of each, and then I've marked the bottom of each glass, and then I'm going to kind of like 3-card Monty everything, and then do some tasting and comparisons and see if I can tell which is which. So I'm using today as my beer, my control beer, my spike beer, Amstel Light. And I was told by my instructor at the in-person Cicerone off flavor class that this is the beer that they typically use in their exams. I can't find this in Canada, so since I'm in California, I grabbed a 6-pack and I wanted to do it with this beer just so I could kind of learn as closely to the guidelines as possible. So what you always want to do is have a separate beer that you're not doctoring at all, and this is your control beer. So this is the one that you're going to taste and smell, so you know that that's what it's supposed to taste and smell like, and then you can kind of compare with your other samples. So the nice thing about the control beer is that you will always be able to get more. You might not be able to get more of the spike samples, but you can always get more of this because you're tasting it each time you're comparing it. So that's awesome. So I'm going to do, the ones I'm going to focus on today are DMS, and I labeled them here. So DMS, which was dimethyl sulfide, diacetyl, and oxidation. So for DMS, I wrote my own little notes because it's not on the list. So DMS typically presents kind of as like corn or like cooked vegetable flavor. So what I did was, like last week or so, I opened a can of corn, I drained it, and then I saved the, you know, like the corn juice and I added like maybe not even like a full teaspoon into the beer. I haven't tasted it yet, obviously, so I don't know if that was too much or not enough, but there is a threshold for each off flavor that people can taste. And the thing is, even though there might be like a threshold of a certain amount that people are able to taste, usually when you do a spike kit, they're at like that very highest level because they want you to learn what it smells and tastes like. That's when you get to like people that are really more experienced and they've trained their palate. They can detect maybe like lower levels of something, and you know, maybe I couldn't taste it at all, but they can detect it. So I don't know if that's the right amount. We'll see. So the next one we're doing is diacetyl. And this one's pretty easy because you can basically use butter extract. And that's something that you can buy. I bought this at like a bulk barn, like a bulk food supply store, but you could probably find it at any, like most grocery stores maybe, or like a store that focuses on like baking supplies. Obviously you can probably order it online somewhere. I wanted a smaller bottle, but they did not have any. So now I have 2 ounces of this, and I only needed, for my 12-ounce beer, I only needed 4 to 5 drops. So this is going to be around for a while. And if you're not familiar with diacetyl, it's like a naturally occurring flavor in foods. And it actually has been isolated as like a butter flavoring in the food industry. So like when you think of like movie popcorn, that's basically just like diacetyl pumped over the popcorn to get that butter flavor. So anyway, that's handy to have. And this has been in the fridge too. And then last but not least, we're gonna do O for oxidation, which here is actually, where are we? On the back, would be the trans 2 non-enol. That's what that's called. So this one is fun because it basically says, open your bottle to the air, like take off the cap, reseal it, and then keep at 100 degrees for several days. So I very carefully opened the bottle. I let it sit for like, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute. I capped it, and then I set it outside, and I set it in our backyard, like direct sunlight. It wasn't 100 degrees. It was maybe like some days 80 degrees, some days 70 degrees, but it said for several days, and I probably left it out there for like 2 or 3 weeks. One, because I kind of forgot about it, and then two, because I had an ER situation a couple weeks ago, and I just like didn't have time to deal with it. So I'm hoping that it kind of gets that flavor because it was out for that long. So what I'm going to do, I've already added my diacetyl and my DMS to my beer. So I'm going to pour those into my sample cups, and I'm going to open my oxidation beer. This is very exciting. I can probably see my marking on each cup through the beer, but that's okay. So one thing I noticed right away is that my DMS beer is very fizzy, probably because I added the corn water. The oxidation beer is like super flat because obviously it's like it's been opened, and you know. I want to point out too my little tasting glasses. So when you're in a situation where you're doing an exam or you're judging, you're always going to be served in a clear glass. Usually it's plastic, and it's usually like smaller because you're only getting a few ounces, and typically it'll be it might be like angled. And the idea with that is that you want to be able to see the color. You want to be able to look at it, especially if you're judging like for like beer and to see if it's true to style. But you want to be able to put your hand over it and kind of swirl it and smell. And if you do that with a glass that's really wide at the top, your hand won't fit over it and you'll just kind of splash it all everywhere. So that's usually what you'll see when you have your sample glasses. So now I'm going to pour my control beer. And if you want to watch, this is how I open my beer, like the oxidation one, so that I can recap it. So you don't want to just, you know, like wrench it right off. I just go around a little bit. So it's not really damaged in any way. And then you can kind of snap it back on. There you go. So what we're going to do is pour our control beer. And I don't love light beer, but it's been really hot today, so I'm actually kind of looking forward to this. So what you want to do, interesting. What you want to do is smell. And there's different ways you can smell. You can do like up close. This is called like a drive-by. You can do it from down here. Some off flavors and like off aromas are strong enough that you can smell them from down here. So you want to just kind of like smell. And then since they're not really looking at color, because most of the flavors that we would be tasting are like at the chemical level, they're not going to be obviously visual, you know, we wouldn't see them. So color is not necessarily as important. Although sometimes in the case of oxidation, in certain beers, it could kind of make it look brown. So there's that, but you would probably never have that kind of beer as a sample. And then you taste it because you want to know what it tastes like as it should. I haven't had this in a long time. Okay. So now that we know like what it should taste like, we're gonna do this little mix up thing. I'm gonna try not to look. I'm not looking, but I also don't want to spill because I don't want to have to clean it up later. Okay. So I'm not gonna look at the glass. So this, I usually like to get like really in there because I find that I'm not that great with off flavors. If we're doing a kit that's been spiked, I'm good at that. But if I'm tasting a beer like at a bar or at a brewery, I'm not as good with picking out the off flavors. I might be able to tell something's wrong, but I maybe don't know what it is. So I just always like to get in there and smell it. Okay, I accidentally looked at which one this was, so I'm gonna trade these again. Okay, all right. I think usually with like diacetyl, you can really smell it. Oh, this one is really, it's got kind of like a bitter aftertaste. There's a couple ways you can taste as well. You can sort of like breathe in, if that makes sense, like as you're drinking it. I like to kind of swirl it around on my tongue. And then you can also breathe out through your nose after you've swallowed. Okay, I'll do this one. Oh, see, right away, this one, and I might have done too much, I don't know, but this one smells just like butter. Wow, and I accidentally cheated and looked, and I'm wrong. Wow, that's really interesting. That is very interesting. I'll tell you what that is. That's very interesting. Okay. Okay, this one smells like butter. And actually diacetyl can present as like butterscotch too. So sometimes I've been with people and they're like, oh, this beer tastes like butterscotch. Like, is it supposed to be kind of like desserty? And it's like, oh, that is really, that's wrong. Ooh. That is not pleasant. And again, I might have done a little too much, but at least I know that it's there. So, wow. Okay, I'm gonna start with the first one. So the first one I tried was DMS, which is kind of like the corn flavor. So normally with DMS, I can actually smell it like pretty easily. I feel like beers with DMS smell like canned corn to me. Other people smell like other vegetables. It really just depends on your own senses. So it could have a slight corn smell, and this is when we'll kind of do this swirling, because what happens is this is sort of, I mean, we're aerating it, but basically it's kind of bringing up all these bubbles with the carbonation, and so we'll get some aroma. This one would be tough, I think, because I know there's something wrong with it compared to the control. But I would need a little bit more in there to know for sure that that's DMS, like a little bit, like a couple extra drops. I'm gonna do a couple extra drops, why not? I have my little spoon here. Isn't science fun? I love science. Okay. I definitely get, like, at the back a hint of corn. And there are some beer styles where, like, it's weird. A lot of beer is made with corn, like flaked corn. But because you're just using the corn for the sugar, you're not getting the flavor. So sometimes people think, oh, like a cream ale is made with corn, it's okay that it tastes corny, and it shouldn't. So it's like, I always, you know, I tend to get confused sometimes, even myself, when I'm trying these things. Yeah, that has a weird bitterness to it, which I don't care for. So my next beer, this one is very fascinating. Okay, this is my oxidized beer. So it's funny because I left it outside for so long, and my mom kept asking if I was gonna drink it, if I was gonna use it, what am I doing with it? And my brothers were like, why is that out there? And I was like, I'm doing a science experiment. I probably left it out a little too long because it actually, it's totally flat. It has zero carbonation whatsoever, but it tastes like water. It really, yeah, it tastes like water. It's, yeah, that's pretty awful. Okay. Now my last one, my diacetyl, this definitely smells like butterscotch. And it tastes like beer that has like butterscotch candy in it. That's really pretty awful. So I think I would probably be able to judge these three pretty easily. The other one that we didn't talk about, which I tried to think how I could do my own spike for this, but I just wasn't sure if it would work. So another one is called acetaldehyde. And again, it depends on the person. Some people get like pumpkin, like cooked pumpkin. Other people get green apple. So I was thinking, could I like put a Jolly Rancher in there for like, I don't know, 10 minutes? Excuse me. And see what happens. And then I thought, well, what if it's in there for too long? I don't know. I don't want to screw it up. So I decided to just skip that one. And then the other one that I didn't do is Light Struck. And basically this one just says, if you have a beer in green bottles, expose it to sunlight for 1 to 3 days. So I didn't even need to do that, because if you've ever had a Heineken or a Grolsch, or I tried one a few weeks ago, I think Golden Pheasant, or anything really even in a clear bottle, like a lot of the Mexican beers, they smell and taste like skunk. Like that's what happens. The light interacts with the hop acids that are still in the beer, and it converts them, and they just start to taste skunky. But again, I have a friend who thinks it smells like coffee, so it really depends. But so that one I didn't need to do because I've had Heineken. You really can just open the bottle and smell it, and then there you go. Like that's an easy one. So yeah, this is my little off flavor, science experiment. I think I would do okay, like I said, kind of determining whether or not it had an off flavor and which one it is, because you're only going to be asked about 5. And so chances are, 1 out of 5 for the most part, pretty good odds there. The other thing that it asks, like we said on the practice test, so then you'll get to this part where it says signs of mishandling. So that's when you need to know where these off flavors actually come from. So for example, DMS, and I can't believe I drank that much of it. So DMS is actually formed as the beer is being made. So basically, grain, when it's malted, it has the precursors to form DMS. It's called SMM. So basically, if the grain is not kilned long enough, it could have that precursor to form DMS later on. And that's why a lot of times you'll find it in light beers, because they're using really lightly kilned malts, like Pilsner malt or pale malt, or just like, light two-row. That's why when you are boiling your beer, you need to boil for a long time, because that boiling volatilizes those compounds and then it escapes into the atmosphere. So this would be formed as the beer is being produced. Then we've got diacetyl. And again, this is something that can naturally form. And there are some beers where, if you have a really low level of diacetyl, it's okay. Maybe it complements the beer somehow. But basically, this would form, this comes from the yeast. So the yeast lets off certain compounds as it's fermenting the sugars and producing alcohol. And so that's why brewers do what's called a diacetyl rest after fermentation is done. And basically what happens is the yeast that is still active in the fermenter will go and sort of reabsorb those molecules and clean everything up. So basically the rest is a day or two at a certain temperature. You actually raise the temperature a little bit so that things are more active. And then basically they reabsorb everything that you don't want, and then the yeast drops out when you cold crash and then you remove it. So this would be during production as well. So then we've got oxidation. So this would be like once the beer has left the brewery, this would be like a packaging or a handling issue, because bottling, like when you're bottling, you want to make sure that you're capping the beer. The foam will come out as the bottle fills, and you cap right on top of the foam to push out any extra oxygen. So you don't want any like oxygen or air in there before you're like sealing the package. It could be that like maybe you've had a keg that's on tap for too long and it just starts to kind of go flat over time because the gas is sort of just like pushing out some of the CO2 that's in there. What else? I mean, again, exposing it to light, like that doesn't help either. So, you know, there's a couple different areas that, you know, we can look at when we talk about oxidation. What were our other ones? Light struck. So that's when, again, we talk about the light kind of gets through. So when you're packaging beer, you really want to look at using like a brown bottle or a can, if you can, like a metal can. Haha, if you can. So that's why beer that's in green bottles or clear bottles is usually kind of skunky. But like kegs are a good option if you're doing like a lot of commercial licensees. Yeah, or like a crowler, things like that. So just protecting it from the light. And obviously you want to keep your beer, like at all times, you want to keep it cold, and you want to keep it out of like even fluorescent light, because that light can affect the beer just like sunlight. And then we've got acetaldehyde, and that is also formed during the beer production. And I forget how it's usually formed, so I might have to do another video later on that. It's not super prevalent that I found, so that's why sometimes I forget like where it comes from, but that is on the production side. So basically, when they're asking on this sample test, where would it have come from after it left the brewery, you really only have like a couple options. So it could be like bad packaging, could be not being refrigerated, could be sitting outside, it could be sitting in light. Another thing is you might be able to get some diacetyl flavors from your tap system if it's not cleaned like properly or often enough. It should be cleaned every 2 weeks, like professionally. If you aren't sure how to do it, have it done professionally. But basically, the bacteria that builds up in the lines can kind of create some diacetyl in your beer. So even though the beer is okay in the keg, it's traveling through that line and through the tap, the faucet, and then it's got diacetyl. So I have talked long enough about off flavors, and I am super hot still, so I'm going to drink the rest of my Amstel Light. I hope this was helpful. I've been looking forward to doing this, and hopefully I can, you know, maybe do it again where I have my husband do some spikes and then hand them to me, so that it's really like a true blind tasting, and then I have to like figure it out. So I want to do that. And then I'm also going to hopefully do some comparison tastings like this one, where we have two similar beers, and then I have to decide which one it is. So this is just my next step in my Cicerone journey. My in-person test is in a month, basically a month. So I feel like I'm running out of time to study. So hopefully this was helpful to some of you. If you have questions, please let me know. If you have comments, let me know. Thanks for following me. Hope to see you again soon. Cheers.